Welcome back to The Evil Within 2. Now, a couple of weeks ago we went through the entire game getting every achievement except for one. Well, today is where we get the last one, and it is easily the hardest achievement in the game. For this we have to complete the entire story on Classic Mode. Now, Classic Mode is the same as playing on Nightmare difficulty, which isn't too bad. However, checkpoints have been completely removed, and you can only save the game 7 times, so you have to be super careful with your save spots. But not only that, because of course that would be far too easy, you can also not upgrade Sebastian in the slightest, and you can't upgrade your guns either. Everything is base. So will Classic Mode be easier or harder than the dreaded Akumu mode from the first Evil Within? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out, and also if you haven't seen my previous Evil Within 2 video I made, or any of them to be honest, I would highly recommend you go back and watch those first, as they do give you all of the juicy context that I won't be able to cover in this video. So get them watched. But without further ado, let's get to Classic Mode. Welcome to the achievement grind. Now, starting Classic Mode, I had some rough estimates on where I wanted to use my 7 saves. I think the most important saves that I could do were right before the big boss fights, so I knew I needed one for Stefano, one fairly close to Theodore, and definitely one for the final fight with Myra as well. So with rough guesses and a lot of prayers, I booted up Classic Mode and got straight to it. Our journey starts, of course, in Chapter 1 with the house fire. Honestly, it's pretty much impossible to die here. It's all just set up for Lily saying that you're a bastard, the scenes with Kidman saying that she isn't really dead, and then you're a hop, skip and jump straight back into STEM. There is literally nothing here worthy of comment. That's it, 1 chapter down, 16 more to go. Now again for Chapter 2, there isn't anything really here worthy of note. It sets up the situation you're in that things have gone very bad. You're also introduced to Stefano and his magic camera, as well as you meeting the Guardian for the first time. We more or less speed ran this chapter, as well as there's nothing here worth picking up, as you don't get your first gun or key until after this chapter is done. So we outrun the Guardian once, we meet her again, Stefano then throws his knife at me, we use it to kill the demon, and then we throw ourselves through this white door and into the cabin that would eventually lead us to Union. At this point, even though I knew that the start of the run would be easy, I also had a slight bit of confidence to my step, as we're still getting through faster than I was expecting. We meet the knockoff Resident Evil 7 food scene woman and put a wonderful bullet into her brain before moving on to the first part that actually made me a little nervous. Now previously when I first played this game on Nightmare, this scene where you meet your first horde of the Lost took me quite a while to do because I wasn't really used to the controls and just kept dying. And I knew that if I didn't get it done this time and first time, I'd have to start the game again. Not the worst thing that could have happened, however I didn't want to redo all the unskippable cutscenes that I'd just gone through. So knowing not to fight is definitely the right decision, I immediately sneak around them, until a Lost sees me and tracks me down. Now here, I panicked, I threw a bottle at her and I was able to manage to sneak kill her, and thankfully this didn't alert any of the other Lost around us, so I was free to carry on. We stabbed the Lost patrolling the safe room and the one banging on the door, and we let ourselves in. Honestly, I was very relieved that we did this first try, as now I know that we're about to talk to O'Neill and start Chapter 3, which is where exactly I wanted to use my first save. So pre-Harbinger O'Neill gives me the signal, and we use our very first save, before heading back into the safe room to meet Tatiana again. Now, when we sit down though, she actually has something to say that I wasn't expecting at all. What are you gonna say? I can't use your...
There's very little I can do for you here.
Oh!
This is a challenge you have to face as you are.
I knew what I got myself.
That's so cool!
I'm not worried.
The lockers here are still free to use, though. I get the feeling you'll need their contents now more than ever.
Honestly, I love this little attention to detail. They didn't need to do this for the game, but they did, and I appreciate it. It's the small things that add up to make a great game in my opinion, and this is exactly what I mean by that. But pieing Tatiana off, we head out to the first open world section of the game. Again, I wasn't too worried, as I knew the routes I had to take and pretty much every enemy that I was going to face along the way. So the first port of call was to grab the Agony crossbow again. Now here, pretty simple, I get it, the Lost Horde find me, but I electrocute the water and stand on their delicious squishy heads. I also collected a couple of the easy locker keys that I knew along the way to the petrol station on the top of the hill to meet Lily. Now for this run as well, I'm not going to be messing around with any of the side missions or objectives. We're essentially speed running this, as there isn't actually anything here that we need. So we cautiously pressed on. We found the Lily shadow, saw what happened, and knew that the spawn would be very close behind. Again, this didn't bother me too much though, as even though these creatures would kill me very quickly, again from the first playthrough I learned that if you you take a far right path and go out of your way to go as right as you can actually sneak past them and avoid them completely. A couple more visions of Lily later, we get to the point of entering the warehouse. Right now, things are going well in my opinion, and I'm quite happy on the progress that we've made. We make it indoors, we find the shotgun and find Lily's doll and go to leave. Now this part as well, I was a touch worried about because you have to fight 3 spawn face on, and I knew that if I didn't play this right then they would tear me to shreds within seconds and I'd have to redo chapter 3 all over again. Sure, not the end of the world, but that's the thing with this challenge. The further ahead you make it after a save point, the more nervous it makes you that you're going to lose all of the progress that you've just made. And because of that, the further you go, you get a little bit more nervous and end up making some mistakes, which, well, we'll get to. But thankfully the spawn also didn't give me much hassle, besides this one bastard scaring the smeg out of me, that is. But with a couple of well placed shock arrows and the use of a barrel's fire, we put them all down first try and went back to go see O'Neill. Now at this point as well, some enemies spawn all over the place, but it's nothing, as it's only about a 1-minute sprint back to the safe room, and we make it there flawlessly. Now starting chapter 4, we quickly make it to the other side of the map and hop into the Marrow. However, there we take a quick pit stop back to the safe room again. Now I don't actually think I showed this in the first part, but at the start of chapter 4 you can actually unlock a shooting range where you can test your skills and win some stuff, mainly gun parts and gel and keys and such. But since this is classic mode, we have no need for gel and weapon parts, so instead it just gives you an absolute ton of herbs and gunpowder, which is fantastic. So we quickly went through all of the levels to stockpile as much as we could, because we're rapidly approaching a room that I hated and was very much dreading. Now in the Marrow in chapter 4 you eventually make it to this door where you have to wait for it to open, and whilst that's happening a bunch of different Lost come to attack you. Now one of the Lost in here is something called a bitch. Not legally called that, but that's what I'm going to be calling her. This fish looking feck has unbelievable speed, a lot of health, and the knife attack that she can do will absolutely drain your health. So I was very worried about this fight, because if I die, straight back to the start of chapter 3 that I go. So we started the fight and I was struggling with 2 Lost when I hear this absolute weapon come out and decide to give me the fear. Now she did this by teaming up with fellow Lost. Knife strikes into grabs and more Lost showing up. I was certain that I'd be restarting, but I kept my cool and burnt through more or less every single herb that I had just unlocked through the shooting range, and with one final trusted shotgun shot, we put that bitch down for good. Now even though I was very on edge still, the fact that I had dealt with this room and won on my first try made me certain that I can complete the rest without an issue. Oh god, how wrong I was. But we made it through the rest of the Marrow very well. We stormed through the first person section and through the rest of the facility and onto the next part. Now, I knew what was coming next, and again, it did make me slightly nervous, but I had a plan. When we left the room, I knew a Guardian fight was next. However, like the first time that I played, my plan was to not fight her at all. Because at the end of the day, just because it's an armoured plated alien killing machine that salivates unspeakable slobber, it doesn't mean that it's a bad person. So we're going to run. The Guardian is assembled right in front of us and we sprint round to the back of the house as fast as that we can, and start the process of getting the door open. Oh, come on, 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 come on. In, get in! Bye! With slamming the door in her stupid face, we were ready to continue. However, I knew what was next. Another boss fight, of course. And again, not to hone on, but I haven't saved since the start of chapter 3, so I knew that I needed to win this fight against Stefano's Obscura. Luckily, we don't actually need to kill this creature, we just need to injure it and stall it enough for the countdown timer to reach 0. And even though it is still technically a boss fight, I wasn't too worried because as long as you've got stamina, you can actually outrun any of the attacks that it makes. And only moments later, the countdown was finished and we were good to continue. We leave the building having turned the machine on and head straight back to the office. Once there, we calm down, gather ourselves and use our second save. Not dying once so far also felt great and I was so happy with the progress that I was making, but I knew the fight that I was not far off reaching. So cautiously, I carried on and then headed straight into the next open world section, chapter 7. Now even though again this is more of an open world section of the game, all we have to do here is destroy 2 paintings that could clear the entrance to the theatre so that we can have the fight with Stefano. And I already knew where both the paintings were. So we reached the first painting within minutes and Sebastian gave his best impression of me looking at an uncut steak. God, Sebastian just doesn't get it, does he?
I'm gonna stab the shit out of you.
Such a stupid joke, I'm sorry. But once inside this painting, we have the easiest sequence ever. Now, this is meant to be a scary, intense moment as the Obscura returns, but the speed in which you open the door makes this part really easy and honestly a little bit anticlimactic. But one masterpiece slashed, one more to go. Now, on the path to the next painting, we hit a snag. We bump into the Guardian again and a couple of Lost that really do some damage along the way, so we speedily throw ourselves into the next painting. Now, I also was aware that this painting would be harder than the last as it's a small horde of Lost you face, with of course one of the fish bitches lurking around as well. So we used our best friend to help in this section, Stealth. We expertly stabbed and slid past undetecting Lost. However, when that went to hell, we used our other best friend instead, and Bomb. Thankfully, that gave me enough time to quickly get the door open, slash the art, and clear the path. Once we left, we simply sprinted to the theatre and finally was there, ready for the Stefano boss. Now, this is where I was extremely nervous. Stefano is what we call in medical terms a prick, so I knew I needed to save here as well, as if I was going to die in any section of the game, it was going to be here. So, 3 saves down, only 4 left. Now, honestly, the fight with Stefano, his first phase isn't actually that bad at all. Besides a lucky hit or two, we can take care of him pretty well consistently. However, his second phase with the Aperture is where Stefano gets his medical name. And honestly, there's only 2 reasons why this part of the boss fight sucks. Number 1, the Aperture's tentacles that I could just not avoid no matter how hard I tried. I would always accidentally run straight into its path and it would always deal huge damage. But the other part that boiled my blood was a specific Stefano move in which he full on sprints at you, grabs you and wipes away your health pretty much instantly. And he can also do this no matter your state, so if you're in the middle of reeling from a bomb hit, he will just simply grab you out of it and take away whatever health and dignity that you had left. And here is where we had our first death. Thankfully, the panic saved was completely justified, and oh my god was it justified, as the next chapter or 2 was where the pain really started for me with this run. As unfortunately the deaths did not stop there. Again and again Stefano just keep getting the better of me, and death after death I was slowly losing the will to live, until about maybe 30 or 40 minutes later, 7 deaths and a couple of extremely lucky shots, Stefano was down for the count. However, it's not all good news, as I then had to complete the next chapter before I could fully feel comfortable enough to use another save. Now, the start of chapter 9 immediately introduces you to Theodore. Now, I honestly don't really remember this character that much other than the evil within one scene at the end, but you can see the exact moment where I remembered what was coming next. Oh, I've just remembered it's the fire bastards. So fire bastards aside, I carried on and slowly made it comfortably throughout the level, until we got to this room with a lever. In this section you need to take the lever and use it to unlock the next door. That normally would be fine, but once you remove it, for some reason it unlocks all of the doors in the room. And the area is soon swarmed by a group of Lost and a fish bitch. And the bitch is exactly what I was worried about, as I didn't have too much ammo after the Stefano fight and knew that she took some shooting to put down. But thankfully and somehow miraculously, we took her out fairly quickly, even though we are now shockingly low on ammo. Now we get to the true pain that I was fearing. A short while later we find ourselves in front of 3 Discipled, fire-covered Lost that can destroy your health bar. Now normally you can just wait for them to not be on fire and sneak kill them, but here 3 spawn and immediately spot you, so you have to fight them. And, well, this happened. Reload you! And with that, right back to the theatre and having to face Stefano again. But thankfully, we took care of him and made it past the horrible room again and was right back at the fire bastards. And then this happened. Awful. But I have 4 bombs. And... Now honestly, this part destroyed me, as the worst part was just the time that I had lost because of the Stefano fight. Then making it to the Disciples again easily took 30 or 40 minutes, so this section took me hours and a shirt change to get through. But eventually, with a little perseverance and luck, we killed them and moved on. At the end of this chapter as well, we are also thrown into the next where we are in the cabin with Torres. Now, I said it in the last video, but my god, I love Torres. She's actually a great sidekick and deals well with the lost. Once again, screw you, Joseph. So this section was a little bit scary, but we made it fairly well thanks to Torres and her very well programmed AI. The next part again, I wasn't too worried about. I knew there was my next save point only meters away, so my plan was to use Torres to light up the disciples in the path so that I could then save ammo and be a lot safer, as the disciples are exactly gods at catching their prey. Then I actually realised that I had plenty of ammo and Torres wasn't being as quick as I'd have liked, so I decided to take the last one down manually. That hit! Yep, and with that, right back to the Stefano fight. My god, I was in a foul mood after this, as for the first time that I'd faced him to now, I'd lost maybe about 4 or 5 hours of playtime. So I wanted this part done and done now. Fortunately, I pulled out my inner John Wick and ripped every enemy apart that stood in my way to the next save point. We killed Stefano, the prison room, the disciples, the cabin, and we cautiously made it past the next lot of fire effects. We reached the safe house, opened the door, hopped in, and thankfully many hours and a rage quit later, we were at the next save point. The start of chapter 11 was here, and we never had to do the Stefano fight ever again. I was so happy, to say the least. I mean, here's my reaction. Yep, that happy, that noise. And thankfully chapter 11 was a breeze compared to the last, and we effortlessly made our way through the Marrow and lost, until we reached our next boss fight. This is O'Neill, or the Harbinger, and he is armed with a very angry flamethrower. Fortunately though, this boss fight isn't anywhere near as difficult as it seems, as not only is he horrendously slow, but he can actually be sneak attacked for some massive damage. So with this boss fight, I was bizarrely confident and was ready to move on quick, and thankfully that's exactly what happened. With a final stab in the back, he was down and we were ready to blow up his machine and go fight Theodore. Now here we accidentally shoot Torres, rest in peace Torres, and we're thrown back into the safe room ready to meet up with Hoffman at the hotel to make it through the firewalk section. Now I wasn't bothered about getting to the hotel as it's only a minute or two away and you can sprint straight there, but the firewalk did give me the fear, so I decided to use another save here as well, so now we only have 2 saves left for the rest of the game, as by my calculations I did have a spare, as the only point I know that I needed to save for sure was the save before Myra. Now the firewalk was intimidating as you're in a pretty confined space with disciples running at you from every angle, but thanks to my bizarrely quick reflexes and a slight scare, we both made it there in one piece. Well, not both, Hoffman burns to death, but let's not focus on the negatives. Now it was only a short jump to Theodore, however we unfortunately underestimated another fire bastard who quickly teaches me to respect him. But since we had just saved, we only had to do the firewalk again, which for the second time went just as smoothly, and by giving the fire bastards a lot more respect and with a lot more running, we made it past that entire section too relatively easily. And before the fight with Theodore, I thought it was best just to be safe and use another save. But with that, all of a sudden we're in front of Theodore, and just as fast we're back in Evil Within 1. God, I adore this section. So the sadist gets taken out automatically, and I wasn't worried by the Keeper or by Laura, as I knew that the pistol ammo respawns against the Keeper, so I could just give him everything that I had, whilst the Laura fight we just have the gigantic fire trap that could more or less insta-kill her. So just like that, the sadist dies, the Keeper dies, Laura dies, and Theodore dies. Now we're on the final home stretch, just one more section to go until we reach chapter 16 and go towards the final fight. Now the next section, honestly, I wasn't too fearful. I know the rock loss that Myra spawns can take quite a hit, but I also knew that patience and stealth would win me there. And I also knew how to fight the Effigy, so again, I wasn't too worried about that either. And I was thankfully correct about the rock lost. If sneaking past them didn't work, I also found out that by shooting them in the chest with a shotgun, they understandably fall over, and with that you can just stamp on them and they're dead, which is surprisingly the most efficient way of killing them besides the stealth attacks. But unfortunately we messed up with the Effigy. Now the fight itself went wonderful and I was doing some respectable damage, however I had a problem. I had fully run out of ammo. Nothing in the inventory and nothing on the map, which meant that I could no longer kill him no matter how much that I tried. So we made the tough decision that I needed to get killed by it and to try again. It hurt to do so, but I was at peace with this decision, so that's what I did. I died. But now to recap, because I'm sure you don't want to hear me go through all of that again. We killed the sadist, we killed the keeper, we then killed Laura, we killed Theodore. Well, Myra killed him technically, but shut up. We also killed the Rock Lost. Within 30 minutes we were back at the Effigy and I was much more equipped for the fight. Now this is where I used the sniper, and it turns out the sniper is quite a beast against it, as it just simply removes his health from the equation, and with plenty of ammo left to spare and one final shot, the Effigy went down. And that's this chapter over too. We meet Myra and she sends us to the Dust Kingdom. There was only one thing in between me and that beautiful achievement now, the final Myra boss fight. So we used our final save just before it and went to go and kill this maniac. Now I knew I was in for a bit of pain with the Myra boss. Not only does she have like 5 different stages, I was also quite low on ammo. However, I also knew that if you could get past the first stage where you have to shoot her stomach, then some lovely arachnids would show up and replenish your heals, ammo, and give you some gunpowder as well when you kill them, as these guys show up every time you run out of ammo. Now, truth be told, I died here. A lot. For some bizarre reason, when we shot off her arm in the second stage, when she grabbed us with it, we didn't get the crosshairs that I was expecting, so we missed it and died from her crushing us. This really annoyed me, as a bug this late in the game would mean that this entire section may be unbelievably difficult to get past, and I was really confused on what to do. After a couple of attempts though, somebody from my chat asked me if I was actually aiming though, or if I was just blindly shooting. And of course I was. What kind of moron wouldn't? Oh, for fuck's sake, you were right. I'm so stupid. Yeah, not my proudest moment, I can't lie. But honestly, I was just tight. Actually, no, I can't use any excuse. I was just being a moron. Anyway. With the ADS problem now a thing of the past, we soon made it through to the final phase, where we have to aim for the gob. And with one last bullet to the teeth, Myra was dead. We start the final chapter and we're pretty much golden here, as the only thing that we have to do is run for a little bit and shoot with a little bit with Kidman. And it all went swimmingly. We shot as Kidman and we ran with Sebastian. Only a couple of minutes later we dove through the mirror back into the real world, and with that, classic mode was done. We skipped the cutscenes and thankfully unlocked You Asked For It again. And with that, The Evil Within 2 is now finished, and also the entire Evil Within series. The grind is over. Now, honestly, a lot of people compare this to Akumu mode because, of course, myself included, it is a difficulty-related challenge that is meant to stress you out and push you to your limits. However, I must say that Classic mode is infinitely easier than Akumu. Akumu mode was a rage-inducing, hair-pulling, wall-punching experience, where Classic mode didn't really bring out that same rage for me. It was still tough, don't get me wrong, and I'm also sure that the previous couple of playthroughs really set me up nicely for it, but there is no doubt in my mind that Akumu takes the crown on the hardest challenge for The Evil Within. And now for my thoughts on The Evil Within 2, and how does it compare to the first? Well, let me be honest, The Evil Within 2 is an absolute masterpiece in my eyes, and tons better than the first for me. Evil Within 2 is everything that a sequel needs to be and more, and I'm not just talking about the upgraded graphics. Don't get me wrong, this game is absolutely stunning, but every component of this game is just superior in my opinion. The combat is better, albeit with some very annoying moments where enemies don't stagger right, but the writing is better, the cinematography is breathtaking, the pace is wonderful, and Sebastian actually has some character development in this. We can see his trauma and his pain as he fights through this world again, and he isn't a stiff, confused protagonist like he was in the first game. In this game, Sebastian actually has character, and it made me connect with him so much more than I did within the first game. The enemies in this game are also phenomenally designed. Now, it's not void of criticism, as I did feel like 3 big bads was a little bit much with Stefano, Theodore, and Myra. I honestly think it could have been better if they removed Stefano and just focused on Myra and Theodore with his trauma, and then developed them more. And I also have to say that The Evil Within 2 is noticeably more buggy on PC at least than the first. Now don't get me wrong, nothing game-breakingly bad, but definitely some weird animation bugs and iframe issues from time to time, but nothing that I couldn't happily deal with. So yeah, in conclusion, I absolutely loved this game. I personally think it's a masterpiece and one of the best action-based survival horrors that you can play. I would honestly put this easily in my top 5 alongside Resident Evil 2 Remake and the first Outlast game. It is that good for me. Now, understandably, I may get some stick for saying that, but hey, I'm being honest. So, with that, let's move on to the stats. For The Evil Within 2, it took me nearly 51 hours to grind all 51 achievements. An achievement every hour. Nice. For this game, I'm easily going to be giving it a 9 out of 10. It was a phenomenal game, and with a couple of tweaks could have easily been a 10, but still, 9 out of 10 means that I adore it and would implore you to give it a go yourselves, even if you didn't like the first. For difficulty of the achievements though, I will only be giving this a 7 out of 10. To unlock all of the achievements, be prepared to spend a lot of time on collectibles, going through the story nearly twice to upgrade everything, and then of course classic mode. It is definitely tricky and you're going to have to fight for the 100%, but it isn't anywhere near as hard as the first, so I have to give it a 7. Definitely a challenge, but there are harder ones out there. For the hardest achievement as well, it comes as a shock to nobody when I give it to You Asked For It again, because of course I have to. But that's The Evil Within 2. My lord, I really hope they make a third game. But next week, make sure you tune back as we change it up a little bit. And instead of slow and sneaky, we go balls to the walls chaotic with over-the-top weapons and one of the best soundtracks to any game that I've ever heard. I am of course talking about the rhythm-based, heavy metal-obsessed first-person shooter that is Metal Hellsinger. So make sure that you subscribe to not miss next week's High Chaos achievement grind. For now though, thank you all so much for watching. I really cannot stress how much I appreciate you all being here. And also worth saying, I am currently live on Twitch right now. Of course, grinding as we always do, as the grind never stops, so feel free to swing by and say hello. It would mean a lot. The link is in the description down below, but I have rambled on for far too long. I will see all of you lovely lot next week. Thank you again, take care of yourselves, and bye bye for now.
But I won't cry for yesterday. There's an ordinary world. Somehow I have to find. And as I try to make my way to the